Welcome back to the unveiling of City Skylines 2's Economy 2.0. Today we're taking a look at everything from changes to rent, building, upgrades, a sneak peek at some new city services, as well as what's coming next. Sit back and relax, let's roll. We start this week with rent, and I'm sure that all of us have seen those high rent notifications in-game. So what have they done to change it? Firstly, they've removed the virtual landlord, so a building's upkeep is now paid equally by all renters within. And secondly, they've changed the way that rent is calculated, and if you're interested in it in particular, here's the equation. BedMaths tells me zone type times building level, then add that to land value, and then multiply by lot size and space multiplier. To most of us, that's probably a mathematical equation we'd rather not spend our homework time on. So let's get back to the implications that it has on rent. Colossal Order say that it will affect high rent notifications that we might have encountered, and they've tweaked those directly as well. They're now based on a household's income, meaning that even if they currently don't have enough money in their balance to pay rent, they won't complain and will instead spend a bit less on resource consumption. Spend less so you can pay your rent. Kind of makes sense. Good to see. Only when their income is too low to be able to pay rent will they complain about high rent and look for cheaper housing or potentially move outside of your city. Besides that, rent, households and companies also need to pay for the building's upkeep, which ultimately affects the level of the building. When they pay the full upkeep, the building condition increases by a constant amount until the building levels up and the tenants start paying toward the next one. However, if they can't pay that upkeep, the building's condition decreases by the same amount until it's in such a poor condition that it ultimately collapses. And so that's kind of a roundhouse look at what they've done to rent to try and change it so basically it's less annoying for us as players and kind of makes a little bit more intuitive sense to how people would behave. You would try your best, probably, hopefully, to pay your rent rather than going out and consuming extra. Good to see. But it's not the only change affecting buildings. Let's move on now and talk about building upgrades. Colossal Order called this section Building Upgrades Unleashed, and reiterate that it includes zoned buildings that automatically level up and down as we've just discussed, as well as city service buildings, where of course we build them and place the upgrades manually. This stuff doesn't exactly relate to the Economy 2.0 changes, but it shares the same patch and they wanted to show it some attention today. Gone are the days when you had to bulldoze an entire building to remove, or just simply move, an upgrade. Now all upgrades can be removed by selecting the building, finding the upgrade in the panel, and clicking on that sweet rubbish bin icon. A nice, small quality of life change that will make a difference, at least for me. And building on that upgrade point just a little bit more, for sub-buildings there's even more control. They say they can also be removed using the bulldozer. You can pick them up, move them, turn them on or off as needed. Moving them is handy now as they don't have to be placed in connection to the main building. As long as they're within a certain area, a predefined radius, and they have at least pedestrian and or road access, they'll work exactly the same way as they did before. What are sub-buildings? Well, it includes things like the elementary school playground. Now you just need a path to connect them to the rest of the city. While sub-buildings such as the bus depot, extra garage, will need road access, of course, to function. But ultimately now, these buildings can be spread out a little bit more, which is really nice because there is this underlying frustration, at least for me, where you think, okay, I want to put a school here, oh man, but I have to leave this extra space to put the extension or to put the playground, and now I've got this kind of wasted space around it. This should allow a little bit more flexibility. Also, maybe helping to ensure they don't all look exactly the same. So again, another nice quality of life change to go alongside Economy 2.0. When all of the changes that we've rolled out in the last 2 weeks do in fact roll, how will that affect us? Well, good news is that saves from before the rework will still work, though they expect there'll be a transitional period as the simulation changes. And we see this usually after a patch update anyway. Things can be a bit clunky as the city adjusts, so keep that in the back of your mind when it comes to modded saves. However, they can't make the same guarantee. So they direct us toward the modders themselves, updates and instructions from them. It may be a case-by-case thing. Now it's time to bring it all together and relate it back to this stuff, which if you're a regular viewer, firstly, thank you, and secondly, you might remember it from last week. This is the other part of the economy patch, arguably the larger part, with the removal of government subsidies, import city services from outside connections now having a fee, and city service upkeep costs being increased across the board. And of course, these were brought in alongside quite a few other things that we discussed last week. I'm not going to reiterate all of them here because that video still exists, but some of the other headline changes you can see on your screen. Demand calculations changed, new calculations for rent, here we go this week, and production chain rebalancing, alongside some civilian and citizen behavior changes too. Why am I bringing this up again now? Well, because it's related back in this week's update. They say when you load up your city and unpause, there are a few things you should keep in mind. Government subsidies removed, city service upkeep increased, the cost of running is higher. Your city relies on ambulances through police cars and garbage trucks, etc. coming out from the outside, and you need to make sure that you enable that. Import city services to begin with, and don't forget that your neighbors will charge you a fee. Essentially, they're reiterating how the changes will probably make the game more difficult. They go on to say that these changes will mean that the demand bars will adjust quite quickly, and that you shouldn't be alarmed if some of your bars are empty or fill up as soon as you start playing. With the increase in industrial manufacturing space, industry will be on a hiring spree that's likely to drive up residential demand as a result, unless your city already has workers looking for a job, so they recommend giving it some time as companies readjust their production. Employee numbers to be profitable, which they expect should lead to an increase in unemployment. So, the bad times for your existing city continue. Your citizens may also start looking for different types of housing or move around your city after the update. The new calculations for rent and resource consumption should help them find the kind of affordable housing that they're after, or their preferential type, of course. And Colossal Order expect most, if not all, of the high rent notifications to disappear after the simulation has had a while to catch up. Long story short, the game will be more difficult, and existing saves are going to need a little bit of time, a little bit of TLC, so that they can catch up to all of the changes across the economy, and you should expect things to be a little bit turbulent for a little while. And finally, we end this week's update with a somewhat exciting, if not brief, look at what's next. They want to share their plans moving forward. There'll of course be more updates and discussions. They have done extensive testing, they say, on changes and balance as much as possible, but what are they actually expecting next? Well, they've already started work on the next major patch, which they hope to have ready for us at some point in Q3 of this year. Probably we're looking a couple of months away. And they wanted to give us just a little sneak peek. As they previously mentioned, they want to expand the service import to bring us more control. They're also looking at what they can improve in the UI and how the game relays information back to us so that we have everything we need to solve issues, because there are likely to be more of those as well. They'd, of course, continue to love to hear thoughts and feedback and any issues in the city. However, there is just one little bit of extra information and a couple of pictures to go with it. Let's take a look at that now as we wrap this thing up. They say the art team has been cooking up some new free buildings, crucially for us all. I've appreciated the feedback, sticking with them, giving them a chance with cities too, because of course this has been, as you likely know, a long process since the game released relatively late in the piece in October of last year. They say that our patience and support means the world, and they hope that the new buildings and vehicles can serve as some kind of token of appreciation. And we take a look at a couple of those. You can see them on your screen now, obviously in the liquid and then waste varieties. And that concludes the whirlwind look, hopefully, at the economy in City Skylines 2 and the Economy 2.0 update that we expect to roll out probably next week. We'll have to wait and see. They haven't confirmed the date, but they did give us some indication in last week's update, and that would put us around mid to late June. So, if you don't hear from me before, you will absolutely hear from me on patch day once we actually know all of the stuff that has stuck. Thank you for joining me. I'm sure there's lots to discuss on this one, as these, honestly, I believe genuinely pretty good changes roll out to City Skylines 2. How will they be handled? How will we handle them? There is always a little bit of a question mark floating above my head on those ideas, and time will tell. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.